Nathan Cole adjusted his collar, though it wasn't too tight. Station Aurora's air was always perfectly regulated, crisp and cool, but he felt a wave of heat creep up his neck anyway. He wasn't sure why. He was good at this job. After years of representing the Intercivilizational Relations Bureau, he'd handled countless high-stakes negotiations with species far stranger than the Terralath. But this was his first assignment at a Terralath station, and something about their silence made him uneasy. No chatter over comm channels. No casual banter in the corridors. The Terralath spoke only when necessary, and their clipped, formal words left no room for misunderstanding. So when Nathan received a last-minute notification that today's routine supply negotiation would be handled by a substitute delegate, he felt his palms sweat despite himself. "Everything okay?" his colleague Aaron Parker asked, peering up from his tablet. Aaron was another bureau liaison stationed on Aurora, a sharp-witted human who seemed immune to the nerves that plagued Nathan. Nathan sighed, just wondering why they're switching representatives at the last second. Ambassador Calaveth was always prompt and predictable. This new envoy. Aaron smirked. What, you think they're sending in someone tougher to get a better deal? Come on, Nathan. The Terralath aren't that sneaky. Maybe, Nathan said, straightening his back. But you've seen how they operate. Every gesture, every word has a purpose. If they're changing things up, there's a reason. Aaron gave a noncommittal grunt and went back to his notes. Nathan decided to let it go, focusing instead on the holographic charts that hovered over the conference table. He rehearsed his talking points in his head, shipping schedules, volume adjustments, updates to tariff agreements. The usual. By the time the conference room doors slid open, he was ready. He rose from his seat as the Terralath representative entered. To his surprise, the envoy wasn't an older, battle-worn diplomat like Calaveth. Instead, she was relatively young, her shimmering skin catching the room's ambient light. Her ceremonial robes flowed gracefully as she approached, and though her expression remained neutral, Nathan thought he detected a flicker of unease. "Mr. Cole," she said, inclining her head. "I am Leah Dreneth. Ambassador Calaveth has been called away. I will be handling the negotiations today." Her voice was smooth, her English impeccable but accented, each word carefully chosen. Nathan quickly extended a hand, a reflexive greeting he'd learned to curb when dealing with other species. To his surprise, Leah hesitated only briefly before mimicking the gesture. Her fingers brushed his for just a moment, no more than the briefest touch. A soft hum filled the air, followed by a cascade of lights on the room's wall-mounted panels. Nathan blinked, startled, and pulled his hand back. What just happened?" Leah's calm demeanor faltered. Her luminous eyes widened and she took a half-step back. "I shouldn't have done that." "Why? What's wrong?" She glanced at the now-dimmed panels, her expression conflicted. Among the Terralath, physical contact is not just physical. It's an acknowledgement. A connection. My people, they will notice. Nathan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's air circulation. "Notice how?" She folded her hands in front of her as if trying to reassert control over the situation. "Our culture is sensitive to touch. When it occurs, it sends bioenergetic signals that our monitoring systems pick up. It's how we measure trust, intent, even emotional states. By touching your hand. I have triggered a response." Before Nathan could process the implications, the door slid open and Aaron walked in, a curious look on his face. "Everything all right?" "I saw the sensors light up." "We're fine," Nathan said quickly, though his voice sounded more uncertain than he'd intended. He turned back to Leah. "What happens now?" Leah hesitated. "I will need to consult with my superiors. This will be discussed." Aaron glanced between them, raising an eyebrow. "Discussed? What's going on?" "It's nothing," Nathan said, though it didn't feel like nothing. He gave Aaron a look that said he'd explain later. "Let's just proceed with the meeting." Leah, still visibly uneasy, took her seat across from Nathan. Aaron pulled up a chair next to him and the three of them began reviewing the trade data. The usual topics, shipping routes, tariff adjustments, supply chain demands, dominated the discussion. Yet Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that the air in the room was heavier than usual. Every time Leah's hand hovered near the holographic interface, he caught himself watching for another flicker of light from the sensors. Aaron noticed, too. "You're jumpy today, Nathan," he said quietly after Leah had excused herself to consult a data archive. "You sure you're not imagining things?" "I'm not imagining it," Nathan said. She said the touch meant something. "Meant what?" "I don't know exactly. But the way she reacted," Nathan trailed off, glancing at the door. "It's like I accidentally pressed some kind of cultural panic button." Aaron leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the table. Well, I've been here long enough to know one thing about the Terralef, they don't do panic. If this was really a problem, we'd be surrounded by a dozen stern-faced envoys by now. Relax. They're probably just curious. Curious or not, it feels like we're under a microscope, Nathan muttered. Aaron shrugged. Then let them watch. If all it took was a handshake to get their attention, maybe that's not a bad thing. You might have just given them something new to think about. Nathan sighed, knowing Aaron's casual attitude wasn't entirely wrong. The Terralef valued precision and caution, but they were also deeply curious beings. Perhaps the small, unintentional breach of protocol had simply piqued their interest. Yet, as Leah returned to the room, her composed expression back in place, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that he'd crossed an invisible line. For the rest of the session, the negotiations proceeded without incident. Aaron made his usual dry quips, Nathan presented his data with practiced professionalism, and Leah responded with careful, measured words. By the time the meeting concluded, Nathan almost convinced himself that the earlier moment had been overblown. But as Leah rose to leave, she paused, her hand hovering near the console. Mr. Cole, she said, her voice quieter now. I will see to it that no unnecessary attention is drawn to today's events. But please understand that what happened earlier, it is not something we take lightly. He nodded, unsure what else to say. Understood. When she left, Aaron glanced at Nathan. Well, that was cryptic. Nathan slumped into his chair. Yeah. You'll be fine, Aaron said, grinning. Just don't let it distract you. We've got another meeting with the cargo controllers tomorrow, and they're twice as grumpy as any Terralef. I'll keep that in mind. Nathan said the words, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The moment Leah's hand had brushed his, something shifted. It wasn't just the lights or the sensor readings. It was a feeling brief, subtle, and impossible to describe that stuck with him long after she'd gone. Nathan was halfway through a strong cup of station coffee, an acquired taste, he still told himself, when Aaron walked into the office. The man had that particular combination of curiosity and skepticism plastered across his face that meant something had caught his attention. You hear about the extra monitors? Aaron asked, tossing a data pad onto the nearest desk and leaning on the chair across from Nathan. Extra monitors? Nathan asked, barely looking up from his screen. He'd been trying to compile a report on the latest supply chain adjustments, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Leah and their strange encounter the day before. Aaron rolled his eyes. Yeah, the Terralef installed 2 new monitoring panels outside the conference room. Claimed it was a routine upgrade. Sure doesn't feel like one. Nathan finally set his cup down. They didn't tell us about this in advance? Nope. Maintenance crew just showed up at 0700, started wiring things in. Nobody bothered to ask us. Great. Nathan sighed, rubbing his temples. So now they're watching us even closer? Seems like it. Whatever happened yesterday must have set off some red flags. Or green flags. Or whatever color they use. Aaron smirked. You and Leah having a secret romance we don't know about? Very funny, Nathan said flatly. It was an accident. She told me their culture reads a lot into physical contact. It wasn't intentional. Sure. Aaron grinned. But you gotta admit it's a little exciting. Maybe we'll be the first humans to get a glimpse behind the curtain. Nathan leaned back in his chair, frowning. I'm not looking to become a cultural case study. Well, you might not have a choice. They're paying attention now. We've just gotta make sure we don't step on any toes. Or fingers, apparently. Aaron picked up the data pad and thumbed through a few screens. That reminds me, new orders came in. We're supposed to join Leah and her team on a facilities inspection. Apparently, she personally requested us. Nathan raised an eyebrow. She requested us? Why? Aaron shrugged. No clue. Maybe she wants to smooth things over after yesterday's little incident. Before Nathan could respond, the office door slid open and Leah walked in. Her presence still had that strange effect on him, an otherworldly calm mixed with tension. Her robes were more understated today, but her posture was as poised as ever. Good morning, she said, inclining her head. I trust you've received the updated itinerary? We have, Nathan said, standing. Facilities inspection, right? Correct, Leah said. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment before she addressed Aaron. It's a routine walkthrough, but I thought it might help provide better context for our ongoing negotiations. And, she added, glancing back at Nathan, it would be an opportunity to clarify any misunderstandings from yesterday. Aaron shot Nathan a quick look, but Nathan kept his expression neutral. Of course. We'll be ready. The inspection began in the station's docking bay, a cavernous space lined with sleek Terralef cargo ships. Leah led the way, walking with measured precision as she explained the function of each terminal and storage unit. Aaron asked a steady stream of questions, clearly trying to lighten the mood. Are those cargo containers vacuum sealed? He asked, gesturing to a row of metallic crates. Or is it some kind of fancy Terralath tech that's way above our heads? Leah gave him a small smile. They are vacuum sealed, but the materials used are designed to maintain pressure and temperature far longer than standard human models. Our shipping protocols rely on absolute consistency. Sounds expensive, Aaron quipped. You guys must have some deep pockets. Efficiency is its own form of wealth, Leah replied smoothly. Nathan stayed quiet for the most part, focusing on the details she provided. He could sense she was trying to maintain a professional tone, but every now and then her gaze would flicker to him as if gauging his reaction. When they reached the central distribution hub, Leah paused by a large console. This is where all incoming shipments are cataloged and redistributed, she said. Our systems ensure that each package is tracked from arrival to departure. Nathan nodded. Impressive. Your logistics network must be one of the most advanced in the sector. Leah inclined her head. It is. But it only functions as intended because of the trust we place in those who manage it. Each individual has a role, and each role contributes to the whole. Aaron leaned against a nearby railing. Trust, huh? Sounds like a big deal for you guys. It is, Leah said simply. Nathan decided to take a chance. So, about yesterday. I didn't mean to cause any disruption. I hope this doesn't affect the bureau's standing here. Leah's calm exterior flickered for a brief moment. Your bureau's standing is not in question. However, the events of yesterday have drawn attention. It will take time for my people to fully understand what occurred. Attention from who? Nathan pressed. From those who oversee intercivilizational interactions, Leah said carefully. They are monitoring our collaboration more closely now. Not because they mistrust you, but because they are curious about what this could mean. Aaron whistled. You weren't kidding about the microscope. Leah gave him a small smile. It is not a microscope. It is a magnifying glass. Nathan wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or more unsettled. And what about you? Are you in trouble over this? Leah hesitated. No. But I must proceed with caution. Caution's not a bad thing, Aaron said, trying to lighten the mood again. As long as we're all still on good terms, right? Leah nodded, her gaze shifting back to Nathan. On good terms, yes. But careful steps are still necessary. They continued the tour, moving through the storage modules, the data archives, and finally the administrative wing. Leah's explanations remained professional, but Nathan noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor whenever their eyes met. It wasn't tension, exactly. More like an unspoken understanding. When the inspection concluded, Leah turned to face them. Thank you for your cooperation. I believe this will help us move forward more effectively. Glad we could help, Aaron said, shaking her hand without hesitation. She didn't flinch at his touch. Nathan followed suit, and once again, her hand lingered a moment longer than expected. This time, the sensors didn't flash. Leah withdrew her hand gracefully, her expression composed. I will keep you informed of any updates, she said. Until then, I trust we can maintain our current trajectory. As she walked away, Aaron glanced at Nathan. You know, he said, lowering his voice, I think she likes you. Nathan gave him a sidelong look. Not everything's about romance, Aaron. No, but some things are, Aaron said with a grin. Just saying, if you're gonna be the star of some big interspecies story, might as well lean into it. Nathan shook his head, but he couldn't deny the feeling that something important had begun to unfold. Whether it was cultural curiosity, professional respect, or something more personal, he wasn't sure. But as he and Aaron headed back to their quarters, Nathan couldn't help but feel that every word, every gesture was being recorded. Not by the station's sensors, but by the subtle, invisible threads connecting their two species. The days passed and the station fell into a rhythm again, but Nathan couldn't shake the lingering sense of scrutiny. Aaron had a theory, one he shared in the privacy of their shared quarters over another round of the station's famously bad coffee. They're trying to figure out what you mean to her, Aaron said bluntly, setting his mug down. It's not about supply routes anymore, Nate. It's about you and Leah. The way she looked at you during that inspection? That wasn't just professional interest. Nathan gave him a skeptical look. You're reading too much into it. Am I? I've been doing this job long enough to know when someone's got more on their mind than tariffs. Whatever you two started, accident or not, has got the Terralath curious. It's not like I planned it, Nathan muttered, taking a sip of his drink. But I'm not going to feed into rumors either. The last thing we need is to jeopardize the Bureau's relationship with the Terralath. Aaron leaned back in his chair, his grin unrepentant. Look, I'm not saying you should start sending flowers. Just don't ignore it. Sometimes the best way to defuse a situation is to confront it head-on. Nathan didn't need much convincing. That afternoon, when he saw Leah reviewing a console in the administrative wing, he approached her. She noticed him right away, her luminous eyes lifting from the data screen. "Mr. Cole," she said, a small smile gracing her lips. "What brings you here?" "I thought we should talk," he said. "Privately." She tilted her head slightly, her expression curious. About this," he said, gesturing between them. "About the attention we've been getting. I don't want to cause problems for you or for myself, but it feels like every move we make is being analyzed." Leah glanced around, then gestured for him to follow. She led him to a quiet observation room, its large window offering a view of the swirling nebula outside. When the door slid shut, she turned to face him. "You are not wrong," she said. "My people are watching. They have not decided what to make of our interactions." "So what do we do?" Nathan asked. "I can't exactly undo what happened." Leah considered his words carefully. "We continue as we have, but with greater clarity. The Terralath value precision and understanding. If we can demonstrate that our interactions are genuine, built on trust and cooperation rather than confusion, it may ease their concerns." Nathan nodded slowly. "You're saying we need to be more deliberate. No misunderstandings." "Exactly." She folded her hands in front of her. "It will take time, but it is not an insurmountable task." Their conversation might have ended there, but Leah hesitated, her gaze lingering on him. "Mr. Cole," she began softly, "I must ask, what do you feel about all this?" The question caught him off guard. He took a moment to find the right words. "I feel like we're in uncharted territory. I didn't mean for things to get this complicated, but I don't regret talking to you, working with you. If anything, I'd like to understand more about your culture, about you. I just don't want to overstep." Her expression softened, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked vulnerable. "You have not overstepped. It is my people who are cautious, who fear what they do not yet understand. But if you are willing, I believe we can show them that our cooperation is not a threat." Nathan's voice was steady. "I'm willing." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the tension between them felt less like a barrier and more like a connection. Leah reached out, her hand hovering near his for a brief moment before pulling back. "Then we will proceed together, deliberately." Over the next few days, Nathan and Leah worked closely on a number of smaller projects, reviewing trade agreements, fine-tuning supply schedules, and overseeing the integration of new storage protocols. Aaron, as usual, provided commentary from the sidelines, but even he seemed to notice the shift. The atmosphere in their meetings was more relaxed, the awkward silences replaced by focused discussion. One afternoon, as they reviewed a particularly complex shipment routing issue, Nathan caught Leah smiling faintly. "What's so funny?" he asked. "Not funny," she said, shaking her head. "Merely interesting. Your approach to problem-solving is so direct. The Terralath would spend hours debating every possible outcome before making a decision. Sometimes you just have to pick a path and adjust as you go," Nathan replied. "That may be true," she said, her tone light, "though it is not the Terralath way." Aaron, who had been quietly listening, piped up. "You know, I think Nate's right. We've got a saying back home. Perfect is the enemy of good. If we waited for perfect conditions, we'd never get anything." Herself. The three of them shared a laugh, and for the first time, the weight of observation seemed to lift. It wasn't that the unseen eyes had vanished, but that they no longer felt oppressive. In that moment, they were simply colleagues, working together to find solutions. But the sense of progress was soon tested. Late one evening, as Nathan reviewed data logs in the quiet of his quarters, his comm unit chirped. He answered, surprised to see Leah's face on the screen. "Leah," he said, sitting up. "What's going on?" "I need your help," she said, her voice urgent but steady. "There's been an unexpected delay in the supply shipment. The Terralath monitoring systems flagged it as a potential security risk, but I believe it's a simple malfunction. If we act quickly, we can resolve it before it escalates." "I'll meet you at the docking bay," Nathan said without hesitation. When he arrived, Leah was already there, her hands deftly working a console. She looked up as he approached. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Of course," Nathan said, stepping beside her. "What's the issue?" She explained the situation, pointing out the error codes on the display. Aaron joined them a few minutes later, looking half asleep but ready to help. Together, the three of them worked through the problem, each contributing their expertise. Nathan cross-referenced the logs, Leah adjusted the system parameters, and Aaron double-checked the physical cargo seals. The issue turned out to be a minor calibration error easily corrected once they pooled their efforts. When it was resolved, Leah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "You've been invaluable," she said, her gratitude evident. "Just doing our part," Nathan replied, his tone light. Aaron yawned. "Next time, let's schedule these emergencies during business hours, huh?" Leah actually laughed, a soft, melodic sound that made Nathan smile despite the late hour. "I will do my best," she said, her voice warm. As they walked back through the quiet corridors, Nathan felt a shift in the air. It wasn't just the resolution of a technical issue. It was the growing sense of trust, of collaboration that had emerged between them. And though he knew the Terralath watchers would note every detail, he also knew that what mattered most was what they were building, step by step, together. Nathan leaned back against the cool wall of the observation deck, staring out at the nebula. The swirling colors that filled the void outside were familiar by now, almost routine, but tonight they seemed more vivid, more alive. Leah stood beside him, her hands clasped in front of her, her gaze fixed on the same scene. They had just finished another long meeting, yet neither seemed ready to return to their quarters. "It's strange," Nathan said after a long silence. "Out here, so far from Earth, so far from anywhere, I thought it would feel isolating. But it doesn't." Leah turned her head slightly toward him. "What does it feel like?" He shrugged. "Hard to say. Like the station's not just floating out here on its own. It's part of something bigger. There's a connection. A purpose." "You are not so different from the Terralath in that regard," Leah said softly. "We, too, see ourselves as part of a larger whole. It is why our culture places such importance on understanding, on careful interaction. We cannot see ourselves apart from the network that binds us." Nathan glanced at her, trying to gauge her mood. "Is that why they're still watching us? Because they think what happened between us could disrupt that network?" "Not disrupt," she said carefully. "They are curious. They wish to understand the implications of our connection. For them, it is not merely a personal matter. It is a shift in perspective." He let that sink in, turning his eyes back to the stars. "Sometimes I feel like I can't even comprehend what you're thinking. Your culture's so different. The way you approach everything, it's fascinating, but it's hard to keep up." Leah's lips curved into a small smile. "I could say the same of you. Your directness is both refreshing and disconcerting." "Disconcerting?" She tilted her head slightly. "The Terralath rarely act without extensive deliberation. When you make decisions quickly, it feels almost reckless. And yet I cannot deny the results. Sometimes you have to take a leap," Nathan said, his voice quieter now. "Sometimes that's the only way forward." Leah regarded him thoughtfully. "You believe that?" "I do," he said, meeting her gaze. "And I think that's why we work well together. We balance each other out." Their conversation lapsed into silence again, but it was a comfortable silence. Nathan found himself standing a little closer to her, their shoulders almost touching. The room was empty save for them, the hum of the station's systems the only sound. The next day, they found themselves in the administrative wing, working through a backlog of supply requests. Aaron joined them midway through, already complaining about the coffee. "I'm telling you, if the Terralath just let us install a proper human coffee machine, productivity would skyrocket," Aaron said, slumping into a chair. "Perhaps the caffeine content is incompatible with their physiology," Leah suggested, not looking up from her console. "Then we'll set up a separate human-only station." "Problem solved," Aaron quipped, earning a chuckle from Nathan. "You should focus on the transport manifests," Nathan said, sliding a tablet toward Aaron. "And leave the caffeine diplomacy to me." "Sure thing, boss," Aaron said with a grin, scrolling through the data. "Speaking of diplomacy, you two seem to be getting along better these days." Leah glanced at Nathan before responding. "We have come to understand each other more clearly." "Well, that's good," Aaron said. "Because we've got a bunch of new Terralath envoys arriving tomorrow, and I'll need all the goodwill I can get." Nathan frowned. "New envoys? Didn't you hear?" Aaron asked. "Apparently, word's gotten around that our little station's become a model of cooperation. They want to study us." Lee's expression turned thoughtful. "That is unexpected, though not entirely surprising." "Why not surprising?" Nathan asked. "Because we have demonstrated something they have not seen before," she said. "A working relationship between our species that goes beyond formal agreements. It is unusual." "Unusual?" Aaron asked, raising an eyebrow. "You make it sound like we're some kind of exhibit." "Not an exhibit," Leah said calmly. "A point of interest. One they hope to learn from." Nathan sighed. "Great. More people watching our every move." "Look at it this way," Aaron said with a grin. "If they're all watching us, that means we're doing something right." Nathan shook his head, but he couldn't help but smile at Aaron's optimism. "I'll keep that in mind." The arrival of the new envoys brought an increased level of activity to the station. The corridors were busier, the meeting rooms filled with unfamiliar faces, and the monitoring equipment seemed to hum just a bit louder. Nathan found himself in back-to-back sessions, presenting data, answering questions, and occasionally deflecting overly probing inquiries. Through it all, Leah remained by his side, her calm demeanor and precise explanations a steadying influence. During a brief break, Nathan and Leah stepped out onto one of the observation decks. The station felt more crowded than ever, and the nebula outside offered a rare moment of tranquility. "They're definitely curious," Nathan said, leaning on the railing. "I've been asked the same question 5 different ways today." "They seek understanding," Leah said. "But I understand how it can be exhausting." "Tell me about it," he said with a half-smile. "I feel like I'm under a spotlight all the time." She turned to him, her expression serious. "You are. We both are. But it is not an unkind spotlight. They are looking for something they can learn from, something they can integrate into their understanding of interspecies cooperation." Nathan studied her face. "You really believe that?" "I do," she said. "And I believe we can give them what they seek if we continue to work together." The sincerity in her voice struck a chord in him. "You make it sound so simple." "Simple does not mean easy," she said. "But it is worth the effort." For a moment they stood there, the hum of the station fading into the background. Then, as if by unspoken agreement, they returned to the conference room, ready to face the next round of questions. Together, they presented a united front, one that seemed to resonate with the new envoys. By the end of the week, the station had settled into a new routine. The envoys remained observing quietly, but their presence no longer felt oppressive. Nathan and Leah continued their work, their partnership growing stronger with each passing day. Aaron, ever the jokester, claimed they were becoming a power couple of diplomacy. A remark that earned him a few eye rolls but also a grudging smile from Nathan. Late one evening, as the station's lights dimmed for the artificial night cycle, Nathan and Leah found themselves in the observation deck again. The nebula's colors shifted lazily, casting soft hues across the room. "I think we've done something good here," Nathan said, his voice low. "Not just for the station, but for how our people see each other." Leah nodded. "It is a beginning. A small one, but meaningful." He glanced at her, feeling a quiet certainty he hadn't felt before. "I'm glad we met, Leah. I don't think I could have handled all this without you." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the usual calm in her expression softened. "The feeling is mutual, Nathan. You have shown me a way forward I had not considered." Neither of them said anything more, but as they stood side by side, the nebula's light washing over them, the connection between them felt unmistakable. An understanding that needed no words. Nathan wiped the sweat from his brow as he crouched over the console, his hands flying over the controls. The station's docking bay was bustling, but not in the usual routine way. Crates of supplies had been rerouted, schedules scrambled. Leah knelt beside him, her long fingers manipulating a separate interface. She looked as composed as ever, though Nathan knew her well enough by now to catch the faint tension in her movements. "Systems still glitching," Nathan muttered. "Are we sure this new encryption key won't just make it worse?" "It's the most logical next step," Leah said, her voice steady. "We have to try. The old protocols were leaving too many gaps." "Yeah, but logic and the station's ancient tech don't always mix," he replied. "Give me a second. There." With a final keystroke, the lights on the console steadied, shifting from yellow to green. "Looks like that did it." Leah leaned in closer, examining the readouts. "Diagnostics show the network is stable again. We'll need to monitor it, but this should prevent further interruptions." Nathan leaned back, letting out a sigh. "For now, let's hope the next shipment doesn't throw another wrench in things." Aaron's voice crackled over the comm, cutting through the brief moment of calm. "Hey, you two finished in there yet? I've got a Terralath envoy breathing down my neck about the schedule." "Tell them to breathe slower," Nathan replied, earning a faint smile from Leah. "We're done. Should be smooth sailing now." "About time," Aaron grumbled. "I'll try not to promise them the moon next time, but no guarantees. They're really leaning on this whole learning from humans thing." As the comm line clicked off, Nathan glanced at Leah. "Think they'll ever stop watching us so closely?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quieter. Perhaps not. But their watching is not meant to be intrusive. They are trying to understand something new. It is how we grow. Yeah, but it's exhausting, he said, standing and stretching. Can't we grow without having a dozen pairs of eyes analyzing every little thing? She rose as well, her head tilted slightly in thought. Sometimes growth is uncomfortable, but it leads to greater clarity. He smirked. There you go with the philosophical answers again. I thought you appreciated my perspective, she said, a hint of amusement in her tone. Yeah, I do, he admitted. Just wish we could take a break now and then. Later that day, the station's central meeting room was packed. The Terralath envoys, human delegates, and even a few non-aligned observers had gathered to discuss the next stage of cooperation. Nathan sat at one end of the table, Leah beside him. Aaron, for once, was all business, flipping through charts and providing updates on trade figures. And that brings us to the latest shipment volume projections, Aaron was saying. As long as the recent network issues stay resolved, we should see a 5% increase in efficiency by next quarter. One of the Terralath envoys, a tall figure with gleaming robes and a distinctly aloof demeanor, leaned forward. The incident was resolved quickly, he said, his tone measured. We must commend the human team for their adaptability. Such quick thinking is not something our own processes typically allow. Leah glanced at Nathan, then back at the envoy. Their efficiency is admirable, but it is their willingness to collaborate that has been most valuable. We could not have stabilized the network without working together. Nathan felt a faint blush creep up his neck, though he tried to keep his expression neutral. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially not from a species so notoriously reserved. It's just part of the job, he said. When something breaks, you fix it. Doesn't matter who's watching. The envoy's gaze lingered on him for a moment before turning to the others. Such directness is refreshing. It gives us much to consider. As the meeting continued, Nathan couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. The once stiff interactions between humans and Terralath were loosening, the questions becoming less formal and more curious. It wasn't just about trade routes or supply chains anymore. It was about understanding each other on a deeper level. After the meeting, Nathan and Leah found themselves in the station's central atrium, where the artificial light mimicked late afternoon on Earth. A few Terralath figures milled about, but the space was mostly empty. Feels different now, Nathan said, leaning on a railing and looking out over the atrium. Less formal, like they're starting to see us as people, not just representatives. That is progress, Leah said, standing beside him. It means they are beginning to trust what they observe. Still, I don't think I'll ever get used to being under the microscope. Neither will I, she admitted. But perhaps it will not always feel like a microscope. Perhaps it will feel like a conversation. Nathan chuckled. You've got a way of putting things that makes me almost believe it. Leah's lips curved into a faint smile. Almost? All right, more than almost, he said, nudging her arm lightly. You're a good influence, I'll give you that. They stood there a while longer, the hum of the station around them. Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something important had shifted, not just between humans and Terralath, but between him and Leah. They weren't just colleagues anymore. They were something more. It wasn't something he could define, but he didn't feel the need to define it. Not yet. That evening, as Nathan prepared to turn in, he found a message waiting on his console. It was from Leah, a simple request to meet in the observation deck. He hesitated only a moment before heading there. When he arrived, she was already there, her gaze on the nebula. She turned when she heard him enter, her expression calm but her eyes betraying a hint of anticipation. Is everything all right? He asked, stepping closer. Yes, she said, her voice soft. I just wanted to thank you. For everything. You don't have to thank me, he said. We're a team. Yes, she said, her tone thoughtful. We are. And I value that more than you know. Nathan wasn't sure what to say, so he stayed silent, letting the moment hang in the air. Leah's gaze lingered on his face, her expression unreadable. And then, in a motion so subtle he almost didn't notice, she reached out and placed her hand lightly on his arm. The touch was brief, but it carried a weight that words couldn't. As she pulled her hand back, she spoke again. Your way of seeing the world, it has changed my own. Nathan's voice was quiet. You've changed mine too. They stood there for a while longer, the stars outside spinning in slow, steady patterns. For the first time, Nathan felt like the unseen eyes watching them weren't so intimidating. They were just part of the larger picture, a picture that was still unfolding.